Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another session of the Playhouse. I am thoroughly enjoying these things. The reasons why I do this is just to have some nostalgia, but more importantly, to paint what it takes or what people have done to get the industry to where it is. So on this thing, I have different people, musicians, producers, but I have a lot of people who are also very hardworking in the background. You may never know them, you may never get to know them, but they have shaped this industry to be what it is. And by the industry, I'm talking about the Kenya music industry. With me, I've got none other than a guy who has gone through every single album of mine and given me a lot of feedback. Probably the guy who I argue the most with, completely, but he's such a wise human being. For those of you who do not know, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is none other than David Kuria.
That's such a good intro, Bana. I'm just like,
no, Kuria, I don't even know
I should cut that intro, Bana, and just use it for myself.
Kuria, welcome to the Playhouse.
Cheers,
and thank you so
Cheers,
much for the feedback that you've
I'm like all the
me.
celebrities you've gotten on this thing, now you're getting me. I'm just like my guy.
So, but the thing
Sorry, viewers.
What I love about the Playhouse is as we go on, guys are like, oh my God, he did this. Oh my God, this guy. And people's stories are just what's amazing. So enough with the intro. Kuria, I like starting this thing throwing this thing way back. So, and I'll start with, when did you feel like you had the love and the passion for music?
So,
or for the gospel, this gospel world that you've so influenced.
Yeah. So, what's interesting with me is that I started collecting music, not just listening, in standard 2. That's how far back it goes.
Okay, can I ask, in time, I love putting time frames so people can understand. What year are we talking about?
I have no clue, my guy. I have to do the math in my head, man.
Yeah.
But it was, how old is someone in standard 2? Maybe that's how you do the math.
About 7 years old at that
Around
time.
7, because I'm turning 40, so
whoa,
over 30 something years ago. Huh? So
dude, you are an OG.
Yeah, man, a dinosaur. So what happened was that I grew up in Gomon. In the hood, there's a couple of bachelors who were living together. House number 600, Golf Course Phase 2. I remember because it's called Club 600. And one of them, a guy called David Mutinda, I walked into his room, his bedroom. I don't know if you remember back in the day when guys used to borrow VHS cassettes from libraries. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
So you'd walk into a video library and
before Netflix,
before DVD, but
the physical Netflix.
Before DVDs and whatnot. And you'd walk into a library and there'd be shelves with cassettes on them. Now, this guy was called Deu. We call him Deu. Deu's room had cassettes, but it was audio cassettes. Like everywhere. Whoa. There were shelves everywhere. Like you open his sock drawer, there were cassettes, a lot of original cassettes, a lot of stuff that he had recorded, those taped stuff. I was in standard 2 when I walked into Deu's house, and I was completely blown away by this guy's music. What happened then is that I began to listen to it. When you're in your early years, you really make your preferences in terms of music, and your tastes are set in those years. So it's interesting because for me, I wasn't a believer, I wasn't a Christian or anything, but I grew up on gospel music.
What?
I grew up on Christian hip hop. But let me tell you, in terms of Christian hip hop, I don't know anyone who knows that genre back in the day from the 80s better than I do. Like I listened to, I can tell you who, by the way, I can tell you the first, I can tell you the first recording of a Christian hip hop song ever.
Who is it? Is it Gospel Gangsters?
Ah, my guy, that's so far in the narrative, man.
Forgive me.
I'm talking about the 80s. Gospel Gangsters is the mid-90s.
You're right, you're talking about the 80s.
So I'm talking about called Stephen Wiley.
Praise the Lord, for goodness sake, we're all gonna take a Bible break. I said, praise the Lord, for goodness sake, we're all gonna take a Bible break. So when your fingers start to pop and your feet start to tap, you're listening to the righteous rap.
Stephen Wiley, his first single was called B.I.B.L.E. That was probably 87, 88, or there, maybe a little bit earlier. or thereabouts. So I listened to him, I listened to Michael Peace, Mike E and the G-Rap crew, DC Talk, all these guys who were, so I grew up on Christian hip hop. I wasn't even a Christian. It's just because that's what I was exposed to. And I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the early groups, the Winans, Commission, Take 6, people like that from back in the day. And so it's so funny because my old lady was, she was in business back then. She had just, retired from her profession. She was going into business, and she used to travel quite a bit for business. But what was interesting is she would ask us, so what do I bring you? Mm-hmm. And we're kids, Bana. So my bros are like, bring us Nikes. You know what I mean? Like bring us kicks, bring us filler, bring us what? You know what me I wanted? I wanted cassettes. I wanted C90. I wanted C90 audio cassettes. That's what I wanted. And I'd tell her, bring me a dozen of those. And I remember she went to Hong Kong and she brought me 6 C60s. I was so disappointed, but I was like, this is what I asked for.
You're talking about like the TDK tapes?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Compact.
Wow, so that you can go and dab.
So I can go and, dab is a bad word, my guy. Just like, how do we sanitize that word? But my guy, please, edit that one. But so go and record. And so I began collecting music from standard 2 through primary school.
Where are you in school at this time?
I'm in Nairobi Primary. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Kilimani Junior, KJA. I met a guy called Stephen Othoro, and his sister Anna Othoro, who guys may know because she served in the county government in Nairobi. She had just a ton of music, and I got a lot of music from Steve, from Anna through his younger brother, and. So my love just began to grow, and I began to compile. So I'm a collector. Mm-hmm. So I began to collect music, and I began to collect all these types of gospel music through the years. And then kind of what happened was that now I went to church, and I kind of grew up in the church, and I grew up at what was then NPC Valley Road. And
CITAM now.
CITAM, what is now CITAM. And when I was there, what was interesting for me was that, we began to do gigs and concerts and things like that. And you may not know, but I was a thespian. I was actually an actor. Mm-hmm. That's what I was. So I wrote plays for the church. I wrote concerts for the church. I took part in concerts and camps and things like that for the church. And there is where now I kind of began to become the go-to guy, because that time, we hadn't developed much of a local scene in terms of gospel music.
Yeah.
So we were relying a lot on foreign music. So we do a church concert and guys would be like, Kuria has all the music. We need a song that is for this scene, and I'd be like, oh, there's a commission song that does that. Or there's a wine and song that does this and this. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our concerts, and this is probably when is this? This is the 90s, the early to mid 90s.
Yes.
Then there began to become a thriving musical scene, but everyone was doing covers of American songs and foreign songs. We hadn't really developed. Not until we had people like Peter Dara, for instance. Yeah. We hadn't developed any of that. So you go from church to church, and they're covering Ron Kenoli and Alvin Slaughter and people like that, Hillsong from back in the day. And that's kind of where my love for this thing just kind of began to grow. As we began to do gigs and concerts, there were a couple of churches, CITAM obviously, NPC. Bapo was a big one for concerts. Mm-hmm. All Saints was another big one for concerts. There was St. Andrew's Church. I can't remember all the churches, but there was just a thriving scene, and I kind of just connected with that. Mm-hmm. And how actually I joined. It's interesting because how then I kind of joined the gospel music scene is I began to follow Peter Dara. Who for me was just, actually it's funny because I always tell
when he's in Heart or
No, here's the interesting thing. I go to a concert in Nairobi Baptist, and it's a play, and I'll never forget, it was called Dreams. And it was written by Pete. So I thought Pete was an actor. So I always knew Pete was an actor. And this is even before Heart, and he had his very first album, and I reminded him about this some years back. It's called Say Yes. So I have Say Yes on a cassette, and that cassette is mono. It's not even stereo. So when you play, it only plays on one speaker. Then play on both speakers. And I have the original from this is maybe 1990 or thereabouts. So this is Pete before.
Wow. You know, I've interviewed Pete. So the guy has talked about the recording that he did, I think it was with Jaco Dongo.
Jaco Dongo, absolutely, yeah.
Before he now went and did Heart with Ted Josiah.
Absolutely.
And then left and went and did solo.
Absolutely. So he was solo initially, and he did Say Yes on his own before Ted Josiah and all of that. So
and you have that?
I have the original. I have the original cassette somewhere. And it's mono. I'm like, Pete, I want my money back, man. You sold me a mono cassette. I'm just like, what's going? That's Jazodongo's fault, by the way. Not Jazodongo, Jaco Dongo's fault. But then, so I just began to follow the scene. You know, back in the day, the scene was Peter Dara, Five Alive. Five Alive with Eric Wainaina and Bob Kyoko and why am I forgetting their names? Victor Sei.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they were now the next big thing, just in terms of gospel music back in the day, because they were a gospel act.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and so there was them. There was you know, Five Alive. And then I think there was a bit of like a revolution that happened, because one day I'm in church and I'm at NPC Valley Road, and I see three guys who just look like they landed out of a music video. Just these three guys. One guy, his hair is kind of falling onto the side. I've never seen this before. We're in church. He's wearing shorts and boots. You know that look, that boys to men look for shorts and boots and a shirt and a tie.
Yeah.
So they're dressed. I'm like, who are these guys? And they were a Ugandan group called Limitex.
Bwana asifiwe. Asifiwe. Bwana asifiwe. Asifiwe. Bwana asifiwe sana. Asifiwe sana. Asifiwe. Asifiwe.
It's Jehovah, the King of Kings. It's Jehovah, the mighty God. It's Jehovah, somebody say, the King of Kings. It's Jehovah, the mighty God.
Here we go now. Take it away, take it away.
Praise the Lord, hallelujah. Praise the Lord, hallelujah. Praise the Lord, hallelujah. Praise the Lord, hallelujah. Praise the Lord. I've got a reason just to praise.
Isaac Rucci and them guys. And you know, so they came to, I think the first place they performed in Kenya ever was at NPC. And they performed, and eventually they were also kind of kicked out.
You know, Kuria, it's you who's finally made me understand the impact that Limitex has.
Oh, they were huge.
I've interviewed about 3 different people from the gospel music industry, and each of them said, and then this concert happened
at the Fun.
Yes.
Barclays Plaza. So
not even at the Fun, at NPC.
Oh yeah, at NPC.
At NPC.
The first gig.
And this group called Limitex
came. And they did Malibongwe and whatnot, and we had never seen anything like that, because for us, at that time, as I said, a lot of our scene was Western music.
Yes.
So we listened to the Kirk Franklins and the you know, whatnot from back in the day. But Limitex are really the guys who kind of, I think Pete and Limitex for me are the guys who kind of changed the game, who kind of began just to change the game. I mean, you think about people like Milele and Kanjii and Christian and those guys.
Yeah.
They kind of grew up at the feet of Limitex.
Exactly.
And Limitex had this gig at Barclays Plaza at a restaurant in the basement called The Fern. And I had Pete talking about this on the Playhouse. And every Sunday afternoon we were there. You know, we were there,
No, Limitex or Heart?
Limitex.
Oh,
When they were in
Limitex.
Kenya, yeah.
Oh, they even went and did a
Kenya
gig
went
there.
Limitex, we'd go there, and we'd go to, I forget the name of the restaurant, Hard Rock, I think the Hard Rock Cafe or something like that, on the first floor of Barclays Plaza.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, Heart now, you know, look, a couple of people I think, and I may skip some people, I don't remember everyone.
Yeah.
But a couple of people that I think were really critical for this narrative, but for gospel music, were Milele, obviously, when they came back. Milele had a sound we had never heard. Milele came back and they did a gig at, not a gig, they were part of a conference.
At KICC?
At KICC. No. At KCCT. Out in Rongai. There was Multimedia University.
I went for that thing.
G21.
It was G21, yes.
Yeah. And they did G21. They did their first concert at, I could be wrong, but at Parklands Baptist. And I was there and it rained like crazy and we couldn't hear anything they were doing. So I think Milele was some of those guys. But just before Milele, there was a group called Rap Community. And Rap Community, for me, were serious game changers. There was a church out by railways called GT, Glory Tabernacle, Pastor Wale, and we'd go there every Sunday afternoon. They'd have gigs and whatnot, and you're talking Big Kev. And I remember interviewing Big Kev about it, you know, a couple of years before he passed. Kina Big Ted, Jimmy Okungu, Joe Kuria, B, Soul Child B, and all these guys. So they were a contemporary rap and hip hop and Christian group. We had never seen that.
Before that, was there any Kenyan, especially as a collector of music?
There were guys, there were rappers.
Okay.
There were individual rappers. So there's a guy called Kiggs, John Kigada.
I know Kiggs. Kiggs was a rap, that's...
my guy Kiggs, John Kigada, big up. John Kigada opened the door for many guys. You see him with his white beard these days and whatnot. Oh man, John Kigada was a thing back in the day, man.
that's...
So there were a couple of guys, but I think the guys who really kind of shone the spotlight on this thing definitely were Kina Big Ted and Circuit
and Rap Community
and
now.
Rap Community, yeah. And they opened the door for a guy called Aizo, who was just a phenomenal rapper. And I think it was out of those days that now I told you before, when churches did concerts, we never did Kenyan music. And it was kind of like in this season where we began to appreciate local music and we began to kind of do some of our local music. Rap Community was scandalous. They were scandalous, Bana. They were big time scandalous because we hadn't seen anything like this. They weren't accepted in many churches because Christian rap was not, it wasn't accepted in church, Christian rap. Many of these genres that we have today were just not. They opened the doors. They were kicked out of many places. If you listen to the stories from Big Kev back in the day, Big Ted, those guys, they were kicked out of many places.
Yeah.
But they are the guys who kind of began to open the doors.
LCMC.
Oh yeah, how can I forget? MCLC, sick rapper. An only female rapper back in the day. Then Heart, Heart was probably about the time. I make it the timelines wrong, but Heart,
the general scene at that,
Salio Yugi and Pete and Ted Josiah. And again, we hadn't seen anything like this. I mean, I remember them doing Tu Es Bon, which was like a French themed jam, and they did, what was their Maasai song called? I forget what the song was called. And they did all these songs, and we went for their concerts at the Baptist and, at GT and all these places. And that's when the local scene really just kind of began. In terms of just contemporary music, that's when it began to thrive.
Let me ask you, I've always wanted to ask somebody who would give me a reference to this. I wasn't saved at the time, so I had no interest in going for gospel gigs. But my mom and dad were saved, and they dragged me for this group called LYF.
Oh yeah!
We even bought the CD.
Oh my goodness! LYF was 1993, 94, maybe 94, 95, but it was around there. Loresho Youth Fellowship. Oh man, those guys put together. So I was in high school. I was in Nairobi school. And one service on a Sunday morning, services are pretty standard high school, pretty drab, dull services. And this guy's coming with gear and sound and whatnot, and it's a big choir, and it's young guys looking hip. And they do these jams, and I'm like, who are you?
Who are you?
I actually called a friend of mine called George Said, and he took me to their church just to experience LYF.
What?
Because they put together, honestly, to date, I think it's still one of the best records, that a local record that I have listened to.
Yep.
And people want recording. You have to realize, people weren't recording music back then. Very few guys had albums.
Yeah.
Very few guys. You know, now we're in the age of singles. But
Yes.
there were no singles. It was you do a full album. There
Yep.
were no music videos or anything like that. And LYF were huge. They really were. They had, actually, I remember they had their launch concert. And I could be wrong.
That's what then I
Two
went for.
events
Yes.
at National Theatre.
Yes, that's the one I went for. I went
And
to
I
National
went
Theatre.
for that, and it was phenomenal. But
Yep.
it was just like we hadn't seen, and I'm talking about both gospel and secular. We hadn't seen stuff like this, and it really was so. You know, LYF, and I may forget a couple of guys along the way, and then churches then also had their groups that just kind of began to bubble. They weren't recording then, but Bapo had a girl group called TTBC with Atemi Oyungu and Sarah Oyungu.
What?
I think I don't even Denya Masuko was in that group. Oh man, TTBC would bring the house. There were 4 girls, and those girls would bring the house down.
TTBC.
Thrown together by Christ. I still remember TTBC. And Valley Road had a group called Brotherly Love. And Alfie Minjire and some of those guys were in Brotherly Love. Pete would probably know those guys from back in the day. And we had a group called Victory Team, and there were a couple of groups kind of just, but the guys who took it to the next level are your LYFs and your rap communities and people who started recording. It's a shame that the rap community never actually recorded anything. So all we have is a little bit of footage, you know, bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces here and there. So that's what I think that initial kind of stage looked like.
Yeah.
And then I think what kind of just began to take it up a notch is when churches now, you know, began to do their concerts and whatnot.
Let me ask you, what's happening to you at this time, in terms of life direction, in terms of where you are at?
For one, I think I'm falling in love with the music. Now I'm what I call a music tragic. Yeah? I'm a music tragic because I love music more than most people you know. I still have one of the biggest collections of anybody I know in terms of gospel music. You know, it reached a place where for years I used to buy, when I was in campus, I used to buy 2 CDs a week, every week, for 5 years. Original. So I've got this huge collection of music. But anyway, in this season I'm falling in love with music. I'm in high school. I was in a music group.
What high school?
I tell you, I was in Nairobi school, I was in Patch.
Okay.
And if Jacob Bassi ever hears me telling this story, he'll have my head for sure. But we were in a group, called Spiritual Harmony.
Yeah.
With Jacob Basio and a couple of guys. This is 93, 94. And I tell you, I can't sing to save my life. I don't even know. I joined an a cappella group. And we had one of our most embarrassing, I don't tell this story often, but I was also a rapper in the group. So we had one of our most embarrassing moments when we went for a gig and I forgot my lyrics. It's a long story, I don't get into it, but
You're kicked out. Let's just say.
I was snatched out pole. But I was in high school. I was in high school, I was...
And Patch was famous for its music. I mean,
Patch was famous, and Patch has been famous through the years for especially keyboard players.
Instrumentalists.
So your Tim Rimbui, who incidentally was, before he was a producer, was actually, just after high school, was actually a rapper. I don't know if you know that.
Born Twice.
Him and Julian Macharia had this group, and they deny. If you talk to them, they deny.
Please tell me of that
Julian
song.
and Virgin. I have it on my disc.
I have it. Now we have it.
Now we
Here
have
it is.
Now we have it, man. And
Kuria,
so
you have a collection of music.
I do. I have a lot.
I'm trying to make people understand the archiving that you've done. I've interviewed Tim Rimbui and a few other people who've talked about Virgin. I have looked for that song and nobody has it because we don't have sort of like an archive keeping.
Yeah, I kept a lot of the music. I have a lot of it on cassette, some of it on cassette, some of it is on CD, some of it is on my hard disk.
Regarde-moi ces femmes-là. Qu'est-ce qu'elles ont fait? Ça m'a fait... Je ne sais pas. C'est trop.
Yo, this is Christ. I told you something. There's like a million supus in the CBD, and like a million supus that my eyes could see. A million supus who would go out with me, only a few supus with the man JC. A million supus in the CBD, and like a million supus that my eyes could see. A million supus who would go out with me, only a few supus with the man JC. I was chilling for my 3 down at Ambassador. No stones in my pocket, not even a mega rider. I can't take the shuttle, cause that's for Babylars. I feel like buying fries, but I'm too far from Topaz. I decided to walk over to Cancom, but I was distracted by this chick who was the bomb. Her beauty filled my eyes and I was swept away. It was love at first sight, I had nothing to say. Being the boundaries that I am, I took control of my senses, and I remembered I should flee from all of my tendencies. Before I looked away, I saw another chicky D. She had a food with jelly and deadly sneakers from Nike. Immediately I saw her, I knew she was the one. The sparkle in her eyes was better than of the sun. I was almost hit by a car while I was crossing the road. Too many chicks walking by, couldn't handle the load. From Isich to Dandoch, Guru to Uhuru, Lavi to Valley, 2-3 to 8B. They come from everywhere to this Nairobi, and Lord, I'm crying out, I wonder, can you save me? Like a million supus in the CBD, and like a million supus that my eyes could see. A million supus who would go out with me, only a few supus with the man JC. A million supus in the CBD, and like a million supus that my eyes could see. A million supus who would go out with me, only a few supus.
But there's a lot of music. But the keyboard players, you're talking about Tim Rimbui, Aaron Rimbui, you're talking about Jacob Asio, you're talking about Chris Adwa, you're talking about Zaka Munga.
What? Kaima Mwiti.
How can I forget Kaima Mwiti? Pat really did have this just amazing...
What? All of those are such prominent people who have shaped this industry.
There was a guy called John Amunga before that, but he passed away. They were really central to just our narrative.
Okay. So where are you finding your space in music right now? Because you definitely can't sing.
I can't sing. So that's why I got into concerts and stuff like that. I'll tell you where my entry kind of into the local music scene was. I was going, and this story I haven't really told the story, but I was going to NPC at the time. We had a thriving youth church called Fortress.